The Pittsburgh Steelers have plenty of optimism around them right now, maybe too much. But there are two names in the organization, members of this team, that even those around the NFL believe will walk away as two of the best in the league this season. What's going on, everybody? I'm Noah Strackbine. Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. Find us on youtube.com/allsteelerstalkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Today, we are talking about two members of the Pittsburgh Steelers that myself, many others, but more importantly, those within other NFL organizations believe are going to stand out amongst the crowd this season. 2023 has maybe too much hype when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've talked timelessly about how their window is open, how this is the beginning of, if the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to go on a Super Bowl run, it starts now. And I have been very clear and honest that I don't think that this is the season that the Pittsburgh Steelers go out and win a Super Bowl, but they have everything aligned to go and do so within the next 2 or 3 seasons. They have a quarterback who looks ready on a rookie deal. They have 2 running backs, a much better offensive line, and a ridiculously solid defense, on top of a head coach that has never had a losing season. And if he could turn things like Duck Hodges, Mason Rudolph, and even the disaster of last season into winning years, there is nothing that says that he can't do even more with a qualified team around him like he has in 2023. Which brings us to the main point of this podcast. And that is that right now, not just myself, and I think that it's been years in the making almost, but many around the league, so much so that they have won polls, believe that Mike Tomlin and TJ Watt are headed for major awards in 2023. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler recently conducted a tally of NFL scouts and front office executives about who should win the awards and who the best rookies in the year are going to be. And in 2 major categories, NFL Coach of the Year and NFL Defensive Player of the Year, Pittsburgh Steelers were selected. Mike Tomlin headlines it all as Coach of the Year, as a guy that, as a baseline, stands as a winner and has been for 16 seasons. He holds the longest winning record or consecutive winning seasons of any NFL coach in NFL history. At this point, no matter who you put in front of him, you look at Mike Tomlin as a guy that is going to carry that team to the verge of a playoff. It doesn't mean that they're going to make it. It doesn't mean that they're going on a Super Bowl run. It means that it does not matter who you put on a football field in front of him. If he is there to lead it, there is a strong possibility that that team is going to have a winning record. But people expect even more. This is a quote from an NFL or an NFC executive. Quote, as a baseline, Tomlin's teams are always going to be good. And if the quarterback can deliver, they have a chance to be really good. And I think that goes hand in hand. If this is Kenny Pickett's season, if the defense is as good as advertised, which I fully expect it to be, if Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren can work hand in hand, and if that offensive line actually clicks, Mike Tomlin has all the pieces to do something special. And the optimism isn't heard in the locker room. No one cares about what the outside noise is or how good it is right now. All they care about is week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers, week 2 against the Cleveland Browns, week 3 against the Raiders. They do not care about the hype surrounding this team. But others in the league acknowledge it. And they acknowledge that the momentum is most certainly there. And if Mike Tomlin could carry this team on a magical run, and I don't know what that is, but it's hard to imagine that the Pittsburgh Steelers are not competing for an AFC North title. And I'm not saying they're going to win it. I'm just saying it's hard to imagine they won't compete for it. It's hard to imagine that if the Pittsburgh Steelers click on all cylinders, that this team cannot compete for a top 2 or 3 spot in the playoffs. I'm just saying. And if they do, and if they come back from last year, and if Mike Tomlin just does something a little bit extra this season that he's done in years past, it's going to be hard to not hand him an award. I think the biggest thing when it comes to Mike Tomlin and how people view him and why he hasn't won a Coach of the Year award yet, and in my opinion, has deserved them in the past is because he has set that standard so high that Mike Tomlin is just acknowledged as a guy who wins and as a coach who carries winning football teams. And that comes to hurt him because people look at him and they say, oh, well, this was expected. You should have done this because you're Mike Tomlin. Cool. That's awesome. But at some point, you have to acknowledge that he's doing things that no one else is doing. And if he could do a little bit extra this year, I think it's going to be really hard for him not to take home that award. Maybe they'll overlook him again. I think that would be an instance, again, of them just saying, well, the standard, the bar is here. For everybody else, it's down here. Maybe if you put everybody on the same playing field, and I know in the NFL that's not how that works. In all of sports, that's not how that works. But if you did, Tomlin probably already has one of these awards. And if you did again this year and Kenny Pickett delivers and this team is magical, it's going to be hard for him to not take home an award at the end of the season. The second one is TJ Watt, who is predicted to win his second Defensive Player of the Year award in 3 seasons. He missed 7 games last year and still made a Pro Bowl. And I get it. Most of that was because of his name and his reputation and just kind of honoring a veteran. And I understand that. But there's also way more to this. TJ Watt looks like a freak every time he steps on the football field. TJ Watt is a guy that 2 years ago should have broke the single season sack record. Probably did. They just don't want to acknowledge it. Has a ton riding on this year. And most importantly, this is the first time that the Pittsburgh Steelers have a real opportunity to make a run in probably all of TJ Watt's time here. And they've had other chances. There's been moments where Ben has looked like a guy who could lead a team to a Super Bowl. But for the most part, TJ's been part of a team that you knew there was a ceiling. You don't know what the ceiling of the Pittsburgh Steelers is this season. And therefore, they could go on a run. And if they go on a run, you want to know who's going to stand out more than anybody else outside of Kenny Pickett, I guess? TJ Watt. You want to know who's going to make the most plays? TJ Watt. You want to know who's going to be an animal? TJ Watt. Edge rushers, especially in today's NFL, have the easiest ability to go out and win Defensive Player of the Year. They are game wreckers. And if you are a dog, you will be viewed as a dog. And you will be acknowledged as a guy who can make or break a season and a team. If the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is what I fully anticipate them to be, and there are a lot of questions about the Pittsburgh Steelers and Kenny Pickett and Najee Harris and everybody else on this roster. There is 0 questions in my mind about that defense. I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers defense and I say this could be a top 3 defense in the league this season. And there's no reason that you don't believe that yourself because they have the safeties, they have the inside linebackers, they have the outside linebackers, they have the defensive line depth, and they've done everything in their power to help a cornerback room that I thought was iffy looks a lot better today than it did a week and a half ago. You want to know who headlines that defense every single week? TJ Watt. And if that defense is special, much like the San Francisco 49ers defense was special a year ago, much like the Pittsburgh Steelers defense was special 2 years ago, when you have a special group, a group that defines the NFL, a group that is dominant, that is unstoppable to opposing offenses, that superstar, that main guy standing right there leading the pack, that is the guy that everybody acknowledges as the best defensive player in the NFL. The Steelers supporting cast will help TJ Watt win an award significantly, but on top of that, would it shock anybody if he walked away with 23 and a half sacks this season? Because it wouldn't shock me. Wouldn't even come close. I'd say, yeah, that was deserved. That should have happened 2 years ago. TJ Watt still is probably the best edge rusher in football, and there are a lot of arguments to make, but even Nick Bosa's best defensive player of the year doesn't add up to TJ Watt. It just doesn't. People will forget that TJ Watt missed 7 games last season, and they'll use that as, oh, well, he only had 5.5 sacks. Okay, well, like an AFC scout said to Jeremy Fowler, you can see the storm coming. That storm is the entire Pittsburgh Steelers defense, but it's headlined by TJ Watt. And if this defense is as good as I believe they're going to be, it is going to be hard as hell to not give him an award and to not acknowledge him as the best defensive player in the NFL. And I think that he's going to be. I think TJ Watt's in for a year. I think Pat McAfee, there's a pretty solid chance he's got to make a $500,000 donation to the charity of TJ Watt's choice at the end of the season because he broke the single season sack record. Just saying. If the Steelers do everything that they're supposed to, not only will we be talking about a playoff run, but we will be talking about awards at the end of the season. And it is crazy to think that 1 year ago, all we talked about were the negatives on the Pittsburgh Steelers football team and how you have to lower your bar for what a standard is for the Steelers going into the season. And right now, we're trying to calm the optimism to say, hey, look it, do not mark them down for a Super Bowl yet. While also saying there's a strong possibility that they make a magical run and walk away with two of the best names in football at the end of the 2023 season.